So Alan, your book is done, I believe, and it's going to be published soon, so you will tell me something on it.
Yes. The idea of the book came long ago when, for the first time, many years ago, when I started working with an urban economist. And I discovered that, in fact, urban economists had theories for things that I had observed on the ground. And I thought were a bit idiosyncratic in cities, but in fact they were theories. And if you understand the theory, you have a better understanding of the way a city works. And as a planner, you can do a better job. Now, the problem with urban economists themselves is that they like to understand how city work. They are not so much interested in intervening in cities. And so we end up with a situation where you have urban planners who are in charge of operation, who intervene in the width of streets, the zoning of area, or decide whether an area will be industrial or residential, but who have no theory about it, no concept, except that they like to draw something. And then you have urban economists who are observing from the margin, writing for each other, and they have a good understanding of the way the city works, in particular the market, how the market influences the shape of cities. But they just write papers in specialized journals and do not intervene in cities. So the idea of my book is really to try to put those two things together, to get an operational role to urban economists, and at the same time to get urban planners a little more theory about the way the market works, where design is important and where the market is better to be left by itself, or at least what we can learn from the market as a planner. So I start with the idea of a city is a labor market, and that's what drives cities. And the growth of cities is entirely explained by labor market. From there, I think that if we accept that, there are two things which are really important for urban planners to intervene as the way a city is developed. One is mobility, how to move around the city. The other is affordability. You must have enough land and floor space so different group of population can afford it, including migrants with very little resources. You have to integrate all those people and find a way to integrate them in the city. So that's the idea. And then at the end, I recommend what I call the new role of urban planner, where they work much more with quantitative and especially indicators. Indicators of input, output, outcome, and impact. The important thing is impact. If we decide to put a BRT in our city, it's not to have new buses and things like that. It's to have an impact on employment and affordability of housing. This is the only thing. So, unfortunately, very often people who manage cities just concentrate on input, say we are going to spend 20 million on new buses, for instance, and everybody, we have to go further than that. So, but yourself, you have been involved in this type of planning in India for many years. So, how much progress, and I'm sure, I know you have faced also the same problem as I have. So, how much progress do you think has been done in India in this direction?
Well, India still has a long way to go. We still operate, most of our urban planning operates in the old paradigm, where planners sit and try to design cities. What they try to do is they try to imagine a future city, and then calculate everything that will be needed for that future city.
Right, yeah.
So typically they start off with trying to project the future population, and then they try to work out everything that will be needed by that future population: land, housing, water supply, drainage, transportation. it sounds very scientific,
Yeah.
but the problem is that it does not work. And the simple reason it does not work is because the future is uncertain.
Right.
And uncertain not only because you really don't know what the population is going to be, but more importantly, and I think it's something you understand really well, is you don't know what economic prosperity is going to do, what incomes are going to be.
Right.
If you don't know what incomes are going to be and how many numbers of people are going to be, then you have no clue about what is going to be future demand.
Right.
And if you have no clue about what is future demand and still try to design cities as if that future demand is correct, then you create a plan that becomes a stranglehold of the city. That becomes a plan that everybody has to make that future come about, right? As you know, and as we know, the future is unpredictable, and very quickly everything changes. And in India, typically, what has happened is that when the future changes, everybody just stops paying any attention to the plan. And the city starts growing the way it does. So you get a lot of non-compliance, and you get a lot of illegal construction, and a lot of misery, and a lot of strangling of economic growth. So planning ends up being absolutely the problem rather than the solution.
Exactly.
And that's the way Indian planners, I'm afraid, are still operating. But we are making some progress because more and more people are realizing, sometimes not planners, sometimes outside, is that Indian planning is not working. And we had recently the minister claiming that Indian planning is still in the bullock cart age. Well, it's not exactly the bullock cart age, but it's just conceptually wrong. It's a wrong paradigm.
Yeah, it's conceptually.
Conceptually, they're doing the wrong thing. They try to design a future city. And this is where I love the title of your book, because what you are trying to say is that you can have order without design. That's the title, order without design. So, and the order hasn't, you don't have to have a designer trying to design to create that order, because markets will create that order. But it's not as if you don't need any planning. Of course you need planning, but a different type of planning. And in bits and pieces, I think in Ahmedabad we have some great examples of this new approach being brought in. But I'm afraid it's not happening fast enough for my liking. But it will, because I think at the university that I'm at, there are a lot more people now thinking in a different way. And Mr. Phatak, who you also know, who is now the Dean of Planning there, we're trying to bring about a sort of conceptual shift, at least the new breed of planners in the country. So that's where we're at.
I think that the debate is really the idea of building for needs. And as soon as you say need, you decide what the need will be, and you have no way of knowing. A city is about transforming itself. Successful city transforms itself. You know, we forget that, for instance, a city like Hong Kong, some 40 years ago, the basic of its economy was textile. It was an exporter of textile. Within 30 years, they completely changed their land use, but they allow the land use to change. And it became a completely service city now. There's no textile left. Many cities in the world that I have known, I would have seen the planner, when they see that they are losing textile, trying to keep them, trying to keep industrial area in spite of the demand for office building, thinking that somehow, if they maintain the land use the way it was, it will create new industrial jobs. This is not the way it works.
Yes, this is absolutely true. Once you start from the language of needs, then it's a real problem. Then you make that conceptual mistake, and then everything goes.
And economists never. If you ask an economist what is optimum density, the economist will say, well, it all depends. And indeed, it depends. If you are in an area where there's a lot of demand or no demand or something like that, and where a planner very often will tell you what is optimum density. He will give you a number.
And it give you, because once you start looking from that paradigm, it appears that these optimums, and what are actually nothing but preferences, aesthetic, personal preferences of planners, are justified in a variety of ways.
Right,
and planning education is pretty much about justifying in variety of ways what the current preferences are.
Right. Yeah, I think that the creativity, frankly, has to come from the population and the user of the city, which, when they occupy a lot, will have imagination to know what to do with it. And the planner cannot know in advance. If the planner knows in advance, it will even prevent his creativity by creating rigidity, which will not allow the city to evolve.
You said something earlier, which I think is very important, that planners must think of affordability.
Yes.
And the way we think about affordability here is producing government wants to produce inexpensive goods.
Yes.
Now that's public provision of goods for. I'm not saying maybe for a small section of the population, bottom 5, 10, 20%, maximum. But you must worry about affordability for everybody else beyond that. And one of the best ways to improve affordability is to do something about the large number of regulations that are actually reducing affordability, that are increasing prices and having perverse outcomes on the whole slew of regulations that we have built up over a period of time are impeding the supply of what is actually needed and forcing people to produce at much higher costs or goods, or only allowing sometimes a production high level, high cost.
This is true in India, this is true in the United States, this is true in Europe. Although cities like New York or San Francisco have an enormous affordability problem. Even a city like Auckland, New Zealand, which has plenty of space, which is pretty well organized, has an enormous problem of affordability just because regulations.
But you know what our problem is? Yes, it's a big problem there. Our problem is we have a per capita income of $1,700 or $2,000 per capita. And we want regulations and standards that are afforded by countries with $30,000 and $40,000. So we try and build in standards that can only be afforded by those countries.
Yeah, planners think that they can regulate themselves out of poverty.
Yes, that's a real problem. And so unless in India that paradigm shifts and we do planning in a different sort of way, we are going to continue strangling ourselves and continuing to make planning the problem rather than the solution.
That's right.